So welcome everyone. My name is Michael Jorgensen and I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at CHPTA. Also on the call with us is Sam Moncada, who's President of CHPTA and COPA. So thank you for joining us. Today's format is going to be kind of more of a presentation, but we still want to invite interaction from you guys. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to type something in the chat or put your hand up or just mute yourself and make any comments or questions that you may have. Going forward, we would like to meet on environmental and regulatory affairs on an ongoing basis. So we'd like to set up a peer group where we would meet every 8 weeks, or depending if there's a subject matter that needs more attention, we can always set something up prior to that. Those meetings will be more interactive, so it won't be so much a presentation, but more just an exchange of information. So we're all here about trying to share information and help each other out. I will make the presentation deck available to anyone who wants a copy. I've put a lot of information into the deck as a giveaway, or a takeaway, so you can refer to it. And also, we are recording the session, so we can make that available as well. So without any further ado, we'll get going. So on the agenda today, we're going to start off talking about Quebec Bill 96, which some new aspects of that bill is taking place this weekend on Sunday, June 1st. We'll also talk about anti-greenwashing guidelines that have been put out by the federal government. We'll do a review of provincial blue box programs, just some of the updates from some of the provinces. And then there's a number of plastics initiatives that the federal government has taken on and has introduced, such as the plastics registry and PFAS reporting. And there's been a single-use plastics ban and some proposed impact for packaging and recycled content on packaging and plastics. And then a more specific topic is with some of the housewares and cooking items is some new CSA standards. And then we can talk about next steps. So Bill 96 was officially introduced on June 1st, but some aspects of the legislation are going into effect this weekend on June 1st. And the bill is to strengthen the use of French across business, commerce, and public life. So one thing to note is there was a grace period introduced. So any product that's manufactured before June 1st and complying with previous French language rules can continue to be sold and distributed and offered for sale up until June 1st, 2027. So again, this weekend, there'll be guidelines or legislation taking in place which is impacting packaging and signage and also your websites and workplace language. And again, that grace period is for product has been manufactured prior to June 1st. So anything after that will supposed to be complying with the new legislation. So how's it impacting consumer goods brands? So obviously, in regards to packaging, French must be present and be predominant. That means French must be equal to or larger to any other language copy on the packaging, which is basically what was in place before. In regards to trademarks, we'll get into a little bit later, but recognized trademarks, so those that are registered or common law where no French trademark exists, are exempt from the translation. However, any descriptive generic terms that are part of the trademark must be translated. And again, the grace period is in effect. Signage, in this case, French must be predominant, so at least twice the size of any other languages on public signage. Or in the case of digital signage, the French must be shown twice as long as other languages. So this could impact any POP displays or advertising that you may be doing in the province. So also websites must now offer fully bilingual. French must be equivalent in quality, functionality, and completeness. Also impacts social media. And again, we'll just get into a few more details later. And just, various terms of service, return policies, all that communication will need to be in French. And within the workplace, francization, so there are 20 plus employees, you must be registered with the OQLF. And over 100 employees, need a committee and some paperwork involved. So I found these FAQs on a website, which are kind of, I think, helpful to understand. So if you don't have offices in Quebec, does Bill 96 apply? Yes. So if your products are sold in Quebec, whether direct, via e-commerce, or through retailers, you must comply with the new rules. As we mentioned on packaging, French text must be equal to or more prominent than English or any other language. There are fines that can be introduced between $3,000 and $30,000 per infraction. It does impact private label or Quebec products. Corrugated shipping boxes are discarded before the product is put on shelf is not applicable. However, best practices is a good idea to provide fully translation, but it's not required to have fully bilingual information on the packaging cartons. So again, we talked about the packaging, commercial documentation again, whether it's consumer facing or business facing. So any brochures and flyers and inserts that may be put out need to be adhering to the new regulations, and also business documentation as well. So price lists, order forms, your contracts with companies in Quebec, so that will need to be provided in French. Social media, again, so your posts need to be provided in French, either as a separate post or as a swipe or both, or including both languages in a caption. So the French must match the English version in terms of meaning, tone, and value. So it's something that you guys need to watch out now. Also, with social media, so you may think that maybe you're not specifically targeting Quebec consumers, but anything that a Quebec consumer would be able to see, you have to take that into account as well and comply to the French language requirements. So on June 26th, the final regulation was released, but there were some amendments made, and I'm just going to refer to a couple of them. So one issue that impacts, I know, a number of members was the issue of embossed information into the product itself, so into molds and that sort of thing, where like an on-off switch, where initially it was specified that the French copy would have to be included, which obviously would involve some expensive changes to molds. Now, that was actually removed from the final regulations, although the government has said that they will revisit the issue and possibly make future changes to that in a separate amendment. So I know a number of companies that have gone ahead and made the change anyways. I think even some retailers are specifying that products should meet to those credentials, but I just want to get some feedback from anyone on the call who have maybe gone ahead and made these changes, or let us know what are the retailers saying. Anyone have any comments on this? No? Okay, we'll keep going in. So another thing that was changed in the final version or in the amendments was the issue of trademarks, which I kind of discussed before. So in a major reversal, they reintroduced recognized trademark exemption. So that is only if do not have a French trademark which is registered. So going forward, it's probably a good idea to not register a French trademark if you want to just go with that original English trademark. But try to register the English one if you can. And I know there can take up to 2 years or so, which is why the legislation was altered this way. But again, the important thing to note is that any descriptive or generic copy should be translated. That's part of the trademark. For example, let's say we have some toothpaste packaging and the trademark is something like white teeth. Then underneath it says something the great or the best for whitening your teeth. So that initial name, white teeth, would not have to be translated, but that copy underneath it would be. So, and again, the signage, French needs to be 2 times. Although there is certain copies such as business hours or phone numbers or addresses is excluded from that. So of note, the U.S. government in April identified this legislation as a foreign trade barrier, and in particular, we're concerned with having to translate those generic terms and product descriptions that are part of a trademark. So, but I think the Quebec government and all the opposing parties are very firm on this, so we don't expect there'll be any changes. So any questions on Bill 96 or any concerns that you have right now? Okay. So the next topic I wanted to review was new greenwashing legislation that was introduced in June 20th of last year. So part of a bill C-59. The thing that's been added to previously sort of misleading advertising is that adequate testing or substantiation should be added. Also, it impacts not only products or services that you're selling, but any business activities that you refer to. So on December 23rd of last year, draft guidelines were sent out and asking for feedback from stakeholders. So that consultation period ended in February. So now we're looking for final regulations to come out. So there could be a few amendments made. So the guidelines do not prescribe when or how businesses can make environmental claims. Companies are free to make environmental claims as long as they are not false or misleading and have been adequately and properly tested or substantiated as required. And there are individuals can now initiate any legal action or will be as of June 20th. But as the next bullet point says, the Act does have due diligence defense copy that protects against administrative penalties, restitution, or corrective notices for companies who have taken appropriate steps to try to follow the rules. So again, this impacts claims you're making on your product benefits, which now require adequate and proper testing. Also, on any business activity claims that you're making, must be in accordance with internationally recognized methodology. So what does that mean? Well, basically, those standards need to be accepted in 2 or more countries, well, not necessarily by governments. So the important thing is to not make claims that that you can't substantiate. So this has brought up the issue of green hushing, and our companies are going to be scared off by this, so they're not going to want to make environmental claims. And actually, we started to see this already. So Pathways Alliance scrubbed their entire website of their climate commitments. And also RBC recently have removed copy as well. So I guess they kind of looked at it, and so maybe we were a little, what's the word I would say, maybe concerned about what they had been claiming. So I think some companies are getting legal advice just to remove those type of claims if you have any concern. So these are just sort of the main principles, which you can review later if you like. Went over the enforcement. So that's the new greenwashing regulations. Any questions? All right. So we'll move on to the residential blue box programs, or PPP programs, plastic and paper recycling. So in Ontario, the transition from Stewardship Ontario to the Resource Productivity Recovery Authority, RIPRA, will be complete by December of this year. So as you know, or hopefully individuals with your company know, is that there's been this transition over the last few years where you're having to pay some fees and recording through Stewardship Ontario and then also to RIPRA. So this year, all the reporting will be through RIPRA. So effective December 12th, Stewardship Ontario will no longer be available online, the portal, but you can download any historical data. So if you haven't initiated that and you want to keep that copy, it would go back to when you first registered with the program. If there is any money remaining in the Stewardship Ontario bank account, they are required to return it to producers, but it won't be much. So they're trying to figure out how much that should be done. And of course, reporting for this year, based on data from last year, is due this end of the month, so the 31st, which is the case in almost most of the other provincial program reporting periods. So I think many of you are aware that costs have risen quite a bit in Ontario since they made the switch over to full EPR. There's been a lot of feedback expressed and passed on to the government, so they are or have been reviewing the program. It's been interrupted a bit with the election that went on, but certainly they've heard from stakeholders about the concern of the rising costs. And RIPRA has just recently been selected to be audited by the Auditor General of Ontario. So they'll review if they're meeting their mandate and how efficient they've been. So that's something to watch over the coming months. So in Quebec, again, the program that has been in place for 30 years has gone over a change to a new full EPR. Fees are increasing significantly, and that's basically because one full year has not been invoiced yet for producers. So this year, the two are overlapping, the old system and the new system. So under the new program, the financial burden costs are going to be called the Producer Financial Participation, PFP. So the government is aware that this is going to have a bit of a financial impact on producers. So EEQ and the Quebec government have been discussing some options to make it a little easier on producers. So one thing they're looking at doing is, so there were new expansion plans that were in the works to expand it to IC&I in Northern Territories, and even public places where recycling would take place. So they're proposing that those be delayed for another 5 years. And also if staggering the payments over a longer period than 2 years. So whether the government is looking at doing that is allowing EEQ to take out a loan, and then they can pay back the municipalities what is owed, and then have producers pay EEQ back over several years. So in any event, you probably noticed the costs are going up. Alberta has introduced a new program that officially launched on April 1st of this year. Although reporting has been taking place over the last year. But your reporting deadline for 2024 data is June 30th of this year. So one thing they have put off is a verification requirement. So that was going to be a case where you're going to have to get a third-party auditor to review your data, but that's going to be pushed back for a few years. If you've gone ahead and done it, you can still include that information. Saskatchewan, again, they've had a program in place for a number of years. It was under Multi-Material Stewardship Western. They've rebranded as SK Recycles. That new program, the full EPR, so it went from 75% to now 100% of producers paying for the program. So that took effect on December 1st of last year. Circular Materials is a company you're probably familiar with. They're a pro and involved in almost all the provincial programs in one way or other, whether that's as the official pro or as far as putting the program together for the governments to approve and consulting with them. So basically, they're phasing in the program in Saskatchewan. So starting this year, starting with large urban curbside and multifamily locations. And then at the end of next year, or this year, I mean, that will expand to remaining curbside and multifamily locations. And then the year after that will be depot recycling. Yukon has introduced a new program on February 1st. So they're finalizing details of the program. So that will come out soon. But again, like the other programs, you'll have to register with the Pro Circular Materials. Government or New Brunswick's plan has been in place since 2023. Note for this year that they have included multi-family buildings and schools. So that has been included in the program now as of May of this year. Nova Scotia. So that program will fully take place on December 1st of this year, but producers are required to register and have been reporting data. So again, for 2024 data, the May 31st is the deadline. And in BC, again, a program that's been in place for a while. They actually were the first full EPR program, 100% right from the beginning. But a few things in regards to their Ministry of Environment and Parks is that they've sort of been given some additional powers, which means there may be a little less give and take with industry stakeholders, and they can make some amendments a little easier. But again, costs have been rising significantly, and the province is also looking at including the ICA and I sector, so moving into the commercial and businesses. All right, so any questions on provincial EPR programs? So for this, we focused on the residential blue box type programs, but we know there are other programs like electronics and even specialty products and hazardous waste. So if those are areas that you would like us to discuss in meetings in the future, we can do that as well. So just chose the blue box programs as they have the widest impact for membership. So on the plastics front, Federal government has been introducing a number of new initiatives. The first one I wanted to review was the Plastics Registry. So this is basically a tool that they want to gather information on to help monitor and track plastic from the time it's produced up to its end of life and identify opportunities for further action to reduce plastic waste and pollution. So they're planning to do this in three phases. So the first phase impacts producers of more than 1,000 kilograms of plastic packaging, plastics that are included in electronic and electrical equipment, and plastics and single-use disposal products. And there's a list on the website where the legislation has been posted, where you can see all the actual different materials that are involved, plastic materials. And then there'll be additional reporting required in 2026 and 2027 as they expand the different materials and who is to report on those materials. But the important thing to know is phase one, which will impact those that on the call here who have plastic materials impacted. That is just involving residential waste at this point, so stuff that would end up in the Blue Box program, for example. So just a definition of what a producer is. So it's a brand owner or an intellectual property holder who resides in Canada. So if the brand owner is not a resident of Canada, then the first resident person to manufacture or import a plastic product is defined as a producer. If there's no such, and I'm referring as persons here, but that really means the company. If for the above mentioned bullet point, if there's not such a company, then the producer is the Canadian retailer who supplied the product to the consumer. And if the producer is a retailer and the retailer is a marketplace seller, a marketplace facilitator that contracts with the seller would be the producer. Well, this is the deal. Dealing with a case like Amazon. Okay, this doesn't really impact our members. So again, there are minimum requirements. So you may fall below that and not be required to register. Or again, if you're a foreign supplier, you're not obligated to report, but you should be helping your Canadian import with the information. If you feel there's some confidential business information, you can write to the government to see if you can have that excluded. So again, the deadline is September 29th for that phase one reporting for those initial three categories. I know companies and industry associations and stakeholders have been making requests to the government to see if this could be postponed. So I know they're considering that right now. Basically, with the federal election that took place and another piece of legislation I'll talk about shortly, it's kind of delayed some of the plastics initiatives a little bit. But now that the election is over, and in particular that it's a Liberal government that's being reelected, although environmental priorities may change a little bit, because there's more, I think, more concerned with the economy and with the trade and tariff issues. This may fall back a little bit, but again, there's potential that hopefully some of the deadline of September 29th might be pushed back. But we'll keep on top of that and let you know as soon as we know. So again, phase two will expand to resin manufacturers and importers for those first three categories, as well as expanding upon those other three categories. So, and also looking at ICI waste as well. Phase three, so again, it's just basically will also include plastics collected and sent for diversion and disposal. In phase four, they're going to provide some further information on what will be covered in that. So, important thing from our companies, and we've heard that, and I don't know if any of you have tried to collect this information and try the reporting format, which is an Excel spreadsheet that you can download, is, it's, some of this information can be difficult to determine, especially like materials that are in electrical products. So I know they're working on a calculator as well to help in that process, but it's basically make your best efforts. I think the government realizes that they're maybe not going to get the best data at first, but they just want to get this program going and see that they're trying to make their commitments to reduce plastic waste. Again, there's some links here where you can get the full details of what the materials are impacted and what the processes are. So again, any questions on, oops, let's put that back. On the plastics registry. Okay. So next talk, is PFAS. So reporting was required January 29th of this year. And they're looking to the government through ECCC is looking to assess and manage potential risks to human health and environment, and if appropriate, implement preventative or control measures. So the topic of PFAS has been out there for a little while. In the US, it's impacting as well, and that's basically by state. So states can have different requirements and rules on PFAS. And certainly around the world, PFAS are being studied and for possible bans or preventative measures. So deadlines for that January 29th, or the deadline for the January 29th reporting, there were extensions offered to companies if they made that request prior to the deadline. And that has basically been up to 6 months. So from what I've heard, most, if not all companies were granted like 6-month extension. And for those who are not that familiar with what maybe PFAS are, so they're referred as forever chemicals because they break down very slowly in the environment. But they are included in a number of products in food packaging and firefighting foams, textile, drugs, cosmetics, electronics, non-stick coatings. So again, our housewares members have cookware, and other lubricants on the commercial side or industrial side. So because of their ability to resist oil and water, that's why they've been incorporated over the years in these types of products. But there are again concerns with the amount that is in the environment or in these products, and whether multiple exposure can have detrimental health issues. So again, for reporting, there was a minimum requirement limit that you may fall below on a particular material. And there are a number of other exemptions, probably don't impact our membership. So again, what is important here is that companies are encouraged to make inquiries and obtain information from their suppliers, if that's the case, to help you with the reporting. So I'm just going to go forward here for a minute. So on March 5th, the federal government did reduce a final report, and in that report, they concluded that PFAS should be placed on the toxic substances list. So it doesn't mean they're immediately banned, but it's the start of future restrictions, and that excludes fluoropolymers. So they're kind of looking at doing this in phases. So looking at the firefighting foams first, and phase 2 and a number of consumer products, where there may be alternative solutions to use. And then phase 3, they'll look through remaining product categories. So there are non-compliance fines that can be issued. And again, has anyone gone and tried to, or downloaded the Excel reporting file and gone through the process? Can make any comments on what they've gone through? Okay. So when that final report came out, there was a 60-day consultation period, which ended May 7th. So again, they'll be looking to possibly make some amendments or come out with a final version. Okay, so next area in the plastic category, if you recall a couple of years ago, there was the ban that was introduced on 6 categories of single-use plastics that involved checkout bags and cutlery, takeout containers, stir sticks, plastic ring carriers, and our favorite plastic straws. Now, these products only account for 3% of the plastic waste generated in Canada, but they were sort of the first hanging fruit to apply. So shortly after that legislation was introduced by the Liberal government, it was overturned in November of 2023 by the federal court, saying that listing those plastic items as toxic was unreasonable and unconstitutional. And the federal government initiated an appeal to that to get a stay from the Federal Court of Appeal. So that has allowed the ban to continue while the government awaits the appeal. Now that appeal is we're still waiting on that. It's not been handed down by the court, even though it was first heard in June of 2024. So the feeling is, regardless of what decision is made, um, hopefully soon, it is expected that this case will be raised to the Supreme Court of Canada for a final decision. So again, it remains in effect for now. And this is all sort of part of Canada's initiative for zero plastic waste, which has also been identified as a technical trade barrier by the US government recently. So why I wanted to bring up this piece of legislation is because of it's still waiting for that court ruling that the Canadian government has sort of put on hold some other plastic initiatives they were planning to introduce, and they're kind of waiting to see what will be the result of the ruling. So, for example, one of those initiatives was for recycled content requirements on plastics, plastic packaging and single-use plastics, and also labeling rules that will apply to recyclability and compostability as well. That was initiated in 2023, and the plan was to have the regulations in place by the end of 2024. But again, that's been put on hold for now. There's probably still some work being done behind the scenes, but at this point, they're waiting for news on that plastic bans ruling. So again, this was going to impact plastic packaging, where they're looking to have at least 50% recycled content by 2023, or sorry, 2030. And will also have 100% reusable, recyclable, or recoverable in place by 2030 as well. And working with companies to recycle and reuse at least 55% of plastic packaging by 2030 and cover 100% of all plastics by 2040. These were some initial commitments made by the federal government. Now, again, there are exemptions for small companies where there's gross revenue under 5 million or less than 10 tons of plastic packaging that is put out in the Canadian market. Also, some exemptions for certain types of packaging related to health, nutrition, or safety. Some of that would be in the food industry or medical industry. So I won't go too far in depth here, but again, some of the things that we're looking at prohibiting is the use of chasing arrow symbols. Also using the term biodegradable or degradable. For the use of green color labeling as well. So this was going to be phased in over a number of years. So one thing in the case of recyclability, companies would need to determine that they meet provincial requirements. So that would mean 80% of the population of province or territory is set up to recycle your materials. I mean, so that would be really difficult if you didn't adhere to all the provincial requirements here. So, I mean, it wouldn't be feasible to have different type of communication for different provinces. But again, what they're looking at here is recyclable, non-recyclable, or collecting or recycling. So here is a symbol that was developed that would indicate collected for recycling. So you can see in the lower right-hand corner, there's like a dotted part of the solid line, which would indicate that the product can be collected for recycling. So how this would impact your packaging. So for example, if part of your product, let's say you had a tray and then some film, part of it, if the tray was recyclable, you'd have to indicate this logo. And then for the other part of it, if it was non-recyclable, you'd have the X'd out part in the center. And then you need a QR code, which would include a lot of information where consumers can find out information on how your product can be recycled, where it's being collected, what product or part of it is not recyclable. And again, as far as compostability, prohibited from using the term degradable or biodegradable. These items would be further required to be labeled as non-recyclable. So this is some of the things they were looking at introducing, but as mentioned, it's on hold now, but it's something that may come about down the road. So again, any questions on the plastics front? I know there's a lot of information, and some of you may be more familiar on this than other parts of what we're reviewing today, but again, it's all included in the slide deck, so I'll make that available. So you can kind of have this information and references. So I just wanted to see. I'm just checking to see who's online. Okay, yeah, Rick is online. So the last topic I had on the agenda here for today was an area that applies to electrical cooking appliances. So Rick, if you're able, can you kind of take us through this and what's been involved and what the concern is for out in the marketplace right now?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Michael?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I don't have all the intimate details that our quality team has. The latest information that we have is it's more around heated cooking type products, like toaster ovens as an example. And it's to do is containing the heat or having the level of heat on the exterior of the products. So minimizing that. What we're looking to comply as a business, but what we've been communicated from the government is that any grandfathered products don't have to comply. It's new products going forward, or if we made a change to the composition of a product, an existing product, then it would have to comply to the new standards. But again, I don't have the exact details on the standards other than it's heat related. So when it's sitting on a counter of a consumer, that it's hitting a certain minimum threshold or maximum threshold of heat.
Yeah. So, but these standards are basically in place in Canada now?
They're effective. Yeah, you're saying the 17th. My understanding was in September of this year, but there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what you've expressed to us is to get the word out in the marketplace that companies, especially foreign products that may be coming in, offshore products, or
Yeah,
suppliers.
our concern is that there's a lot of house brands now, and there's a lot of new brands have entered the market, and especially with the onslaught of e-commerce growth, our retailers holding brands accountable, but it could certainly impacts your landed costs, and of course, then ultimately your retails on the shelf. So we're concerned about, is there a level playing field here, and the government is really good at developing these standards, but not very good at policing them.
Right.
So then we rely on retailers to make sure that they're honoring these. So that was our interest in getting the communication out to kind of so everybody understood and were on the same page and create a level playing field.
Exactly. So, yeah. Moving forward, we're going to try to make more of an effort to get more information out from our end. And as I said, we would like to move forward with a peer group um, that can discuss any issues in regards to regulatory affairs, environmental programs. So the plan was to meet every 8 weeks via Zoom. Or, as I say, if there's a particular issue which is a more urgency, we can set up a meeting in between that time frame. So, but the whole point is to try to communicate and educate each other and share information and help each other out. So, as I say, there are a number of topics here that we've reviewed, but there potentially could be other topics that you want to address or and raise as well. So, I just wanted to ask that question right now. If there are any other topics that are of interest as well that we haven't covered today, that you would like for us in the group to review in future meetings. All right. So I'll certainly extend an invite for the group um, invitation to anyone who signed up for this webinar. Or you can email me as well, mjorgensen@chpta.ca. Also, if you want a copy of the presentation deck, email me and I can send that off to you. Also, as mentioned, we are recording this session, so we'll make that available for download as well if you wanted to get a copy of that so you can share with any colleagues who may not have been on the call. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. And again, just open it up to the floor. If there's any comments or questions you have on what we reviewed today and what our plan is going forward. So I guess everyone's on top of all this. So all right. Well, if there's no questions at this time, again, we look forward to engaging with you in the future. And if there are any other topics in this front in regards to regulations, environmental programs, please let myself know. And look forward to hopefully meeting with you in a few weeks' time to go over these and other potential new programs or legislation that's introduced. There'll always be something coming down the pipe from government and bodies. So we'll end it there. So again, thank you for joining us today, and have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Michael. Very informative. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a great day.
Thank you
Bye,
very
everyone.
much. Okay, bye.
Hey,